I never didn't believe in Bigfoot. I never believed in it. I didn't believe in it. I never gave it any thought.
They kept wood knocking back and forth to each other, and it was in a pattern.
Barn owls don't typically throw rocks.
I come across these tracks.
Sasquatch is still not on my mind.
All right. Welcome back, everyone on YouTube, watching, and everyone watching in the future on iTunes, Spotify, and always to watch and listen on iTunes. I try always to listen on the audio apps on your phone. Check it out. BobbyDizzle.com. They got iTunes, Spotify, all the good stuff. Anyway, enough about that. Everybody got their coffee ready. I got mine. I got Mr. Old Bear here. Everybody do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Let me see. What is this? Never mind. I made a little clip. I'm not going to play it because I think it goes in the middle. But let's get started. Old Bear, how's it going? You are a proprietor of a website our YouTube channel full of real life stories by the Campfire. And if you mute it and watch the fire burn, it's just as good. It's like a ambient. So it's like dual purpose.
I try to make it to where it's country based, and because I'm country, and make it at least easily listening to and easily looking at.
Oh yeah. Cryptic Crystal says, how's the wife doing?
The wife's doing great.
Barbarossa, hi Crystal. Tea time with Tiffany. I was just on her show last night, ruining her childhood. That's what I do. So let's get to it. I mean, I don't want to keep you too terrible late because it's Sunday. I'm kind of hungry, and I'm going to be nice and peppy because I don't have a full stomach, so it's going to be amazing. In December 3rd, 1984, you had your first encounter. I kind of just want to hear about that. We can get started there and go wherever the conversation leads.
Okay. Back on December 3rd, 1984, it was the last day of our rifle season here in West Virginia for bucks only. Mm-hmm. And I was 16 years old, and I love to hunt. I love going with my dad, with my brothers. But on this day, my dad had to work. It was a Saturday, and the job that he had at the time, he ran a route, and he had to work on that day. And when he got home at noon, he kind of, in no uncertain terms, said we weren't going. And well, that didn't last long. Mom kind of inserted herself in it and said, "Hey, he's been up since 4:30, right after you left, getting ready. He wants to go." And so we loaded up, drove for 2 hours. He got home about 11, and we was on the road by 11:45 or so, something around noon. Drove out to a spot in Wirt County, West Virginia. And Dad said, there's nobody here. And I bugged him on the way out the road, like a 16-year-old boy does. You got your hunting license. You should be able to go by yourself. At least that's what a teenager thinks. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I walked about a mile back out the ridge on the road that we just drove in on. Cut over the hill to the right. Went down a couple of benches and was sitting about 15 feet from this huge boulder. If you're sitting at that boulder, the deer can't see you until they get just past you. And it's clear shooting lane. You got 2 or 3 lanes in front of you to shoot through, and on out the bench that the boulder's on. So I sat down there beside a big tree, cleared out a nice place to stay quiet. So if I had to move or get up or anything, I wouldn't make a lot of noise. Mm-hmm. And I hadn't been there probably 20 minutes, and I heard what sounded like deer running. And shortly after I started hearing it, 3 does come out. They all had their tongues hanging out. They'd been running,
Mm-hmm.
and they stopped probably 20 yards from me, past me. And as a hunter, 16 years old, the first thing come in my head that there's a buck chasing them. So
Yeah.
they didn't stay very long. They took off running again, and shortly after they took off, I heard the sound of what sounded to me like a deer grunting, like a whitetail buck grunting, chasing these does. And they tend to do that a lot whenever they're chasing. It's the rut time of year. That's when they breed. So I was looking for a buck to come out. And I had a 30-30 lever action rifle with me, and I put it up to my shoulder, and I'm waiting for this deer to come out, step out, and drop the hammer on that rifle. And I seen some motion towards the top of the boulder. I thought it was, I heard leaves scuffling behind the boulder, and I looked, and I was watching, and I seen movement out of the left eye, and I thought it was a red squirrel that was on top of the boulder, that it was up there feeding. And I've seen them on there before. It wasn't an unusual thing. Well, the leave noise stopped, and the movement stopped on top of the boulder. And I'm thinking, well, this squirrel's sitting there looking at this deer, and it's going to step out any second. Well, a couple more steps happened, and then it wasn't a whitetail buck that stepped out. It was a 7.5 to 8 foot tall creature that called Scar, and there's a reason I call it Scar. It had a scar across its left eye, come down and across its eyelid and down into its cheek. And it was standing there looking out the way that the does had went, and it stood there probably 10 to 15 seconds, and then it just turned its whole body and looked right dead at me, and like it had a surprise. Yeah, that's him.
Yeah, I forgot I had that uploaded for you when you were talking about him. There he is.
And
right, go ahead. Sorry.
Go right ahead, buddy. He stood there and looked at me, and he had a surprised look on his face. Like he had his eyes raised up, and eyes were wide open, and his eyes were coal black. There was no pupil coloration. It was just black. And he's in a dark reddish brown, or almost a reddish black color hair all over his body, long hair across his hands. And I'm standing there looking at this creature, and I didn't know what I was looking at. The year before, I know everybody's seen the movie or heard of the movie Boggy Creek, The Legend of Boggy Creek. And I seen that on a Saturday night a year before, and my dad was laying on the couch, and I was laying on the floor, and we were watching this movie. And I looked up after the movie was over, and I said, "Dad, have you ever seen anything like that?" And he said, "No." And
that's such a good movie, though.
Yeah, it is. It's a fun movie to watch.
Before Exist came out, it was the best one.
Yeah.
All right.
And after the movie, I said, "Dad," I said, "Do you think those things are real?" And he looked at me and said, "That's just Hollywood. Don't worry about it." Like, shut up. I don't want to talk about it anymore.
Don't talk about it.
And, about a year later, here we are. This thing is standing right in front of me, and I'm going, "Oh my God, what in the world am I going to do?" I'm 16 years old. I got a rifle.
30-30 too.
And I shouldn't have, you shouldn't be afraid. But this creature it pursed its lips and then done this and started growling. Real deep, low growl. And I'm sitting there going, "Oh no, this is not going to be good." And it took a step, and Now I've got family members that, I have an older brother that was in the military, and my dad taught me how to shoot. My dad taught me a lot of things and never to lose your cool. And my older brother taught me that too. And while sitting there, I put my thumb up on the hammer of that 30-30, and at a half cock, it's a safety mechanism on that rifle. And I put my thumb on it, and I made up my mind, when he goes to take another step, I'm drawing the hammer and I'm gonna squeeze the trigger. I'm not taking any chances. So he raises his leg up. It was his right leg, and starts to move it forward. And when he did, I pulled the hammer. Well, it makes a click. Unless you pull the trigger and pull the hammer back, it makes an audible click. It's not real loud.
Oh, yeah. In
And
the woods, it's loud as a freight train.
yeah, and
That's the loudest thing.
Yeah, and at that point, he's halfway through his step, and his foot starts to come down, and he hears that click, and he's like, now he's surprised, and he takes his foot and puts it back, and I'm looking down the sights. I've got the sights pointed right here.
Now, did you say he saw you at this point?
Oh yeah, he was standing there growling at me and everything,
Yeah.
and he was stepping towards me, and his steps wasn't like mine. Typically, human beings 3 foot on flat ground. On a hillside, 2 feet, maybe 2.5. Well, he's taking up 5 or 6 feet in a step, and he was only at 20 feet from me when he came out from behind that boulder. And at that point, I just kind of, it's like, well, one of us is not going to leave here, and it's not going to be me, because I'm going to unload this 30-30 on you. First shot's going to be in the head, and from that point on, I'm just going to pump lead into you until you don't move. And that type of rifle, we had 8 shells in it. One in the chamber.
And all 7 or 8 of them.
Yeah, it had 7 in the tube. And they're 180 grain bullet. A 180 grain bullet at 20 feet will do a lot of damage to anything.
Flat tip too, so that makes a hole.
Oh yeah.
30-30 playing.
Once it stepped back, it had that surprised look on its face, and then it started turning itself at its hips, looking to which way to try to get out of there. And it finally turned to its right and went the way that it came, out behind that boulder. Now I can't see anything of the hollow that's off to my left where it ran towards. But I could definitely hear this thing running up the hill, breaking small trees and making all kinds of noise. And I stood up and I started towards the top of the bank. I was going to my dad. That was, for me, that was the safe place for me to go, is go to where my dad's at. I got to the top of the bank, and this thing had stopped running. And when it heard me hit the gravel, it screamed at me. And I would estimate it was probably 200 yards away at this point. And when it screamed, it vibrated everything in me. My chest, I felt it in my chest. Even though it was behind me screaming, I still felt it in my chest. And it was, it made me start fearing. And everybody says, well, that's infrasound. That's what it's for. And I understand that. And, I've looked into it over the years, and there's a lot of animals out there that do it. Even the wild turkey can make infrasound when they do their, when they're in full strut and they're making the drum sound. And I'm like, this gun's at full cock. I'm not, I'm gone. I did my best not to run, because my dad always told me, if you're in front of a predator and you run, now you're the prey. So the best thing to do is not run. So I walked back out the ridge with the rifle on full cock. I knew if this thing started chasing me, I was going to make one stand, and I needed every second that I could get, or every split second I could get to drop this thing if need be. And luckily, it didn't chase me down. It stayed up there where it was at, and I got back out to my dad. And when I got to my dad, he was walking out the road. He said, "What's wrong?" And my dad looked right at my rifle, and he said, "Why's your gun on full cock?" And at that point, that stern look from your father, you're like, "I'm not talking about it, Dad. I don't want to talk about it. I just want to go home." And he just kind of looked at me and he said, "What is wrong with you? You're my biggest kid. You're the least of one that I know that would ever be scared of anything in these woods." I said, "Dad, I want to go home." And I'd walked straight past him, walked right straight to the pit, we had a K5 Blazer at that time. I opened the back of it up, rolled the window down, opened the back of it up, pulled my scabbard out from my rifle, and I emptied every one of my shells out of it, stuck them back in the box, took the ones on my pocket, put them in the box, put the gun away, took my orange jacket off, threw it in the back of the truck, and I walked to the front of the truck, rolled the window up on the passenger side, and got in and rolled the window all the way up and locked the door. And my dad walked over and he's like, "You need to tell me what's wrong." He said, "Did you shoot something?" I said, "No, I don't want to talk about it, Dad." And, I was raised to respect my parents. Mm-hmm. If they ask you a question, you answer them. And I had never, ever acted like that with either of my parents or my grandmother. And, I pretty much a straight A student in school. I did what I was told, did what I was, you're supposed to, what your parents expected of you. And that's the way I was raised. But at this time, I just couldn't find the words to tell my dad I seen the thing that come off the movie Boggy Creek. And, he finally unloaded his rifle, got in the truck, and he said, "You want to go home?" I said, "Yes, sir, I want to go home." He said, "Well, you need to tell me what's wrong." And he put the keys in the ignition, started the truck up. And I just kind of looked at him and didn't say anything. And we rode back out the ridge, and right where I come up on the road, I started crying. And I slunk down in the seat. And Dad's like, "What is wrong with you, son?"
I bet he was like, "What in the world? What have you done?
Well,
you thought you done killed somebody?"
Yeah, that was basically, the thing. He said, "Did you shoot someone?" And I'm like, "Dad, no. I'm not talking about it." And we got out of there and got back on the blacktop road, and we got all the way back to a town called Ripley, West Virginia, which from me right now is 20 minutes out the road on the interstate. We got on the interstate, and back then speed limit was only 55. So he got on the interstate, and he asked me if I want anything to eat. No, don't want nothing to eat. Want anything to drink? No, I just want to go home. Got on the interstate. He looked over at me after he got on the interstate, and back then we had a set of bias ply tires on this K5 Blazer.
Buckshots? I'm a co-ops?
No, Gumbos, Monster Motors.
Oh yeah, those are the big ones.
And my dad looked at me and he said, "Boy, I'm not going to tell you again. You tell me what's going on. And if you don't,
scream it over the tires."
Oh yeah. And I'm sitting there and I'm shaking and I'm crying the whole time from the time we passed where all this happened all the way to Ripley. And it's an iron 15-minute drive from there. And my dad just looked at me and he said, "You don't tell me what's going on. I'm going to pull over. I'm going to pull my belt off. Even though you're 16, I'm going to beat your rear end until you tell me." And I looked at him and I said, "Dad," I said, and I'm still got tears in my eyes, and I'm trying to talk. My mouth is dry, and I looked at him and I said, "The monster of Boggy Creek I just saw it. And he looked at me and he said, son, that's Hollywood. That's not real. I said, Dad, yes, it is. It is real. They exist. He said, well, tell me everything. And I told him the whole story. And he looked at me and he went, well, I don't think you're lying to me. I said, Dad, you know I don't lie. You know, I wasn't raised that way. You don't lie to your parents. You don't lie to any adult, least of all your parents.
Mm-hmm. And that emotional response must have held some kind of weight too, because you know your kids.
Yeah, he did. He knows me. You know, I played football. You know, I played football and had broken fingers on the field and everything else. Coach come over and pop him back in joint, and I go right back out on the field. They tape it up, and I go right back on the field and get home. And Mom and my mother would look at my hands and go, how many fingers did you break or dislocate tonight? Oh, just 4, Mom. I'm good.
Just
no problem. And my dad would just sit there and laugh. Yep, that's my boy, tough as nails. And when I told him when he said, okay, I believe you, he said, but I'm going to tell you this right here and right now. Don't ever tell your mother or tell your grandmother. And I said, Dad, what are we going to do? You know, this really scared me. He's like, I understand that, but don't tell your mom or your grandma. And I said, why? He said, because if you do tell them, none of us will ever be going hunting again.
You ruin it for everybody. Don't say a word.
Yeah. So now that's a lot of weight to put on your shoulders at 16. You know, your dad's never going to be a hunt. He taught himself how to hunt. He taught us 3 boys, my brother-in-law, how to hunt and everything else. And now I've got 4 people, you know, on my shoulders besides seeing this thing. And I kept my mouth shut for a long time. I never told Mom, never said nothing to my grandmother. My grandmother passed, and a few years later, and I never said a word to her. And my mother passed in 2008, and in 2005 is when I said something to my mom. So that was, 21 years. And after seeing that creature, I kind of stopped hunting, you know, going all the time. I wouldn't even go. I quit night fishing.
Oh,
I didn't go night fishing to go catfishing or anything for about 5 years. And then after that, I started going back out. You know, my dad made me go. And then I started looking for these creatures and made a lot of mistakes in the first couple of years of, you know, making stupid mistakes. You know, I'm pretty sure that I was the laughing stock of the Bigfoot in the state of West Virginia for the first 2 years of chasing these things around. So that's the reason I got into it. I seen one when I was 16. It affected me so greatly that I just, you know, I had to find out what these things were when I was probably 19 or 20 when I started going out by myself and listening. And then I started trying to make, you know, I got a couple of calls or, you know, heard a couple of them and trying to imitate them. And I'm pretty sure I made a bunch of them laugh because I was bad.
At least you didn't make them thinking you were a female. Like I worry I would do if I tried that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, I don't, you know, I don't do any female calls. No.
Well, I'm surprised your dad didn't hear the scream. It was that close.
Well, where he was at, he was another quarter of a mile out the ridge and over the edge of the ridge. And the only thing that I can figure out is that he heard something, but he didn't know what it was. And when he heard it, I talked to him many times about that afterwards, and he looked at me one day and he said, you know, I kind of heard something, but I couldn't tell where it was coming from. I thought maybe you had tripped and fell and got hurt, and I was going to have to come and get you. And that's why I started out the road. And when I seen you walking towards me with that gun across my chest, with my thumb on my finger on the trigger, holding the hammer, he said, I knew something was wrong with you. And he thought that I'd shot at a doe or I'd shot something I shouldn't be shooting at, or somebody shot at me, because that happens, when you're out hunting, somebody just hears something and just throws the gun up and shoots. But none of that happened. It was seeing a Bigfoot, and it affected me for quite a long time.
That'd been the first thing I'd have went to if something like that would happen. Did you actually shoot somebody?
Yeah.
That's the first thing I thought of. What about the some of the other of your 36 encounters? Like, did they ever get better? You get like more precise at it?
I got better.
Here's a question. What's your strategy for going to a new spot to see if there may be activity?
Okay.
I was going to ask that before the 36 thing. I had them mixed up.
Well, I understand. It's my strategy typically is I'll look over topo maps, and then I'll kind of drive around the area, talk to the farmers, the country boys, and I don't bring up the subject of Bigfoot. You do that, the first thing they look at you like you're a city boy. You don't know what you're talking about. You're just some idiot out here to cause trouble. And if you leave it alone and you talk to these, don't talk to the teenage boys out sitting outside of a truck. They're not interested in being in the woods at night, or they've not been around long enough to hear these things scream or holler or have a pig stole or a cow stole or whatever. You always talk to the elders, the elders around the area. And, people that are 50, 60 years old, if you talk to them real nice and you befriend them, and they'll open up sooner than, you kind of mention, well, I've heard a little bit about, boogers being in this area. And when you say boogers, they understand. You call it Bigfoot or Sasquatch, they're like, what the heck is that? And they'll shut up.
Yeah,
But if you say
boogers seems
boogers,
to be the common term.
Yeah, well, boogers has been, when I was a kid, my grandma used to say, now y'all get in before it gets dark or the boogers will get you.
We had the same.
And we lived in a town. We lived in the capital city of West Virginia. And she still say that. She was raised out in the country. It might be 2 to 3 miles to your neighbor. And, you use terms like that, and that's the way you get into areas, and you look at topo maps, you look for creek drainages or a river flowing through there in a hollow. You look for a lot of oak trees and stuff here in West Virginia. And you do that because they survive on the same stuff that deer eat, bear eat, and bear and deer and turkeys are their primary source of meat. And that's the way they go.
A lot more turkey than deer. Probably easier to catch.
Well, not here in the state of West Virginia. There is more deer than there are people.
Oh, yeah.
And the turkey numbers are, they're way up there around here. So they have a lot of options when it comes to meat.
I always wondered if they ate a lot more grubs and stuff. Something that they didn't have to catch.
Oh, they eat berries. They eat wild apples. They eat wild grapes. They eat, other forbs, roots, earthworms, crickets. It's the same stuff that we can actually, sustain ourselves on. They eat too.
I've heard one account, a fella up in Missouri, saying that he noticed once his activity started, there wasn't any more rattlesnakes or snakes in general. It's like they're digging them out and eating those. Because there's no vipers here anymore. You don't see them.
Well, we got rattlesnakes and copperheads. Copperhead is pretty aggressive snake for this, in the east. And if you go in an area and people say, "Well, man, I go in there, we used to go in there and catch all kinds of rattlesnakes," and there's not very many left, Bigfoot's hanging around somewhere.
Yeah, that's basically what he
They're
said.
using
Like,
that.
yeah, up in the mountains where the rocks are, the hilly areas. Yeah,
Yeah.
we got them here too in the cottonmouths in the swamps. Anywhere there's a drop of water, there's cottonmouths in Alabama.
Yeah.
It's like alligators in Florida.
Well, you can keep the cottonmouths. I don't like them things.
I don't like the other two either. I think that's the reason they invented pump shotguns.
Well, yeah, there's been a few times when we've been out running our, hounds for training them in bear and everything else. We kill quite a few rattlesnakes in the spring and the summer. And they taste pretty good. You just got to be careful with the bones.
That's what I hear. They're fatty too.
Yeah.
They get swelled up like a. What is he talking about? Can Bear retell his own story? You'll have to get you to go back and listen to the show when it's over, Joey. Joey's in Ireland. Kind of might have caught us late. Yeah. All right. Yeah. I always wanted to ask people that do the scouting, like you were discussing, what the strategy is.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I forget to do it. So I'm gonna get it out of the way early. And when you said topo maps, that's one thing a lot of people say. They look for the ridges with the river in it.
Mm-hmm.
And someplace they could look down on, and they get in there. They put themselves in the area where they're like a prey, and so they can make the Bigfoot have the higher ground. That's what everybody's strategy was.
Well,
that I hear.
The reason they do that mainly is because they are the way they act, and I've seen this over 30-some years, 36 years of doing this.
Mm-hmm.
The way they act, it's like dealing with a military unit. I mean, they got an alpha male, he's the general. You got the alpha female, she's the boss over the females, and whatever the alpha male tells her to do, she does. He is the only one that she answers to. And the whole clan answers to him. So they act like a military unit. He dictates where they go and what they do and what their job is for that day or that night. Mm-hmm. And that's how they act. And a lot of people, they make the mistake of not trying to find them and using that piece of information that they're a military unit. They've got people out. They've got their some of the men, the male clan members, are up during the day while the majority of them are asleep. They got sentries out, just like the military does, and they are there to protect the clan, to sound an alarm if mankind gets too close, or another marauding clan is trying to enter in on them. And they'll sound an alarm. And whenever that alarm goes off, the alpha male is right up. He's moving. He's going to where that Bigfoot is, and he wants to know what's going on. And whatever he says goes. If it's another clan and they're interceding on the, interloping on their territory, he's going to deal with them harshly. There's going to be Bigfoot getting smacked around and slammed against trees and picked up and body slammed. Whatever he decides to do is what he's going to do. And that's just the way that the big alpha does. It's his job to lay the law down to whoever and to keep his clan protected.
And that's the one everybody always sees that's 10, 15 foot tall.
Yeah, if you see one that big, it's usually alpha. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You're not the first person I've talked to about that say they behave like a military unit either.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that say they have the same tactics. Like I can't remember who all told me, but it's easily 5 or 6. I've heard that before. That's kind of interesting. So what about your other 36 encounters? Just some of the highlights of some of those.
Well, my first encounter with an aggressive troop of Bigfoot or clan of Bigfoot, however you want to call them, was the day my mentor disappeared. We had went into an area here in West Virginia, up near Nicholas County, and we went in there because people had been telling him for years that they'd hear these boogers in there screaming at night, and during the day they run deer hunters out, or guys would go in there with bear hounds, and the bear hounds would die. They'd find their bodies and necks be broken, or they wouldn't find the dogs. They wouldn't reappear. Their collars are found, but nothing else of the dog is found. And we went in there, and I carried, and I still do. At that time, I was carrying a 44 Magnum, and I had 20, 30 rounds with me, and I carried a deer rifle with me. At that time, it was a 300 Win Mag. And I walked away from him at about 75 feet up the bank from where I was standing when I was talking to him. I said, yes, Mike Thompson, the back of Summersville Lake.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd went in there, and when I walked up there to go use the restroom real quick, I never heard nothing, never heard him scream, never heard any noise. It was dead quiet in there, no wind. When I turned around, he was gone. And, I had to deal with filing a missing persons report. I was looked at like I killed him or something.
Mm-hmm.
And
I was going to say that's kind of what I was thinking of when you said that. I was like, they're going to think you did it.
Well, they gave me a one of those, for the powder residue on your hands.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have any on my hands. There was none on my guns. Never been fired. I had just cleaned that rifle and that handgun the day before, and because he told me, hey, I want you to go with me tomorrow. Clean, get ready, and I'll meet you here. And I met him there at Summersville, and we went on the back side and into a little bit of a different hollow than what connects to the lake. And yeah, we ran into trouble. We never found him. After that, I went back in there, tried to get in there a couple times and was turned away. And after they disappeared, I snuck in there one day right at daylight and went in there, and there's a set of caves in there, and I knew that. And I went and checked a couple of the caves, didn't find anything. And then I found one cave and found his hat ripped up. And I knew it was his hat because of what was on the front of it. He had his name on it. And I kind of lost it, and he taught me everything the man knew. And it was a tough thing to see. Didn't find any blood, just found his hat ripped apart. And at that point, they started following me out. And when they started following me out, I started letting them know that, hey, I'm armed. I ain't a bit afraid to start putting holes in you. And after that, I kind of got to the point where at that point, you can't trust these things. You can't deal with them. They're going to kill you no matter what. And that's the way I proceeded from then on. And I started helping people at that point. I'm 6, 7 years into it, and I started helping people. And one of the times that I helped somebody, it was a couple over in Virginia, and they were having trouble with Bigfoot coming down smacking their house at night. They had lost a couple of chickens, just a couple, and they lost their kid's pet. So at that point, I went there to their house,
Mhm.
and I started looking around and found footprints, found some a tree turned upside down, the root ball sticking up in the air. It wasn't a real big tree, but it was still, it was a tree stuck upside down in the ground. And at that point, I set out flashbangs, and you know, if you're not in the military, you don't know what a flashbang is. Just ask an ex-military guy; he'll tell you what a flashbang does.
I know. Stun you half to death.
Yeah, and you make them with black powder, and people those stink real bad. And that night they come down and they hit the tripwire, and they set off 3 of them, and they went screaming back in the night. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, they came back. They hit another set of them, and they never came back after that. And I refined my tactics after that. If they weren't doing anything to harm anybody, they were just coming down watching you, and you would see them because of it. I didn't have to put flashbangs out. You just go out and put lights up, and video cameras up, and they see all that stuff. They don't deal with that. They don't want to be caught on camera. They know what a camera is. They know what a handgun and a rifle is.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd helped probably 7 or 8 different families over the years. Had many encounters because of it. You'd see them once or twice, and I've been growled at. And after about 15 years, I went back into the area where my mentor disappeared, on the front side, on the lake side, up there, and got a tree pushed down on top of me, knocked me off the bank into a big mud hole. And I got the hint. And I got up and walked out of there, got my truck, didn't look back, drove out of there. But I'd been there that morning with some family members, and we was up there bow hunting, and saw partial print and didn't see any deer tracks, bear tracks, no turkey tracks, and saw 1 squirrel. That told me that those Bigfoot were still in there, and they were decimating their food supplies, and was getting reports from the town that these things were coming down into town late at night from and going into dumpsters because they ate themselves out of their home. And after that, went up there a couple of times, and they kind of pulled back from going into town. They actually left for about a year, and and that's what happened. They just need a little bit of a push sometimes, and they get an idea in their head, and they understand that people are tired of dealing with you, and they want you gone.
Flashbangs were a shock. I mean,
oh yeah, they kind of figured that out after hitting 1 or 2.
Yeah, there's a joke about those that says Helen Keller is immune to flashbangs. Technically. So I don't want to bring up anything traumatizing, but is your mentor still missing? Like, is that?
Yeah, we've never found him.
What was his name?
Out of respect for his daughter and his son, I'd rather not say.
You don't have to tell me. I was just gonna say that's crazy. So they're still going. Yeah, I was gonna ask you. Yeah, you honestly answered a question before I even said it about the caves on the place. Where do you think they would go?
Yeah, they'll get in caves. They'll dig holes in the ground.
Do you think that has anything to do with where the bodies go? Like,
yeah,
at the end, like the cave systems underneath there? Because I know West Virginia, and you got like Mammoth Cave in Kentucky. The county I'm from here in Alabama has the most caves in any county in the world. And
well, you probably got a couple of the caves that are there in Alabama. That is where they, the nice clans stick their dead.
And we definitely have the clan here in Alabama. I don't know if it's got anything to do with Bigfoot, but the yeah, but like you said, the cave thing, like every property, my dad's property, it's not very big, maybe 20 acres, has 2 little caves on it that you can get down in. That's
Yeah.
like those caves are everywhere. And that whenever I start talking to folks like you and about the cave systems, like, man, it's just makes you wonder. Like, I've never heard any reports from back home, but you still like who knows what, who still in denial.
Yeah, and then I kind of like telling this one because it tells on my wife a little bit. We were up in Ohio at a place called Salt Fork. It's a state park in Ohio. It's off of I-77. And we were up there. It was hot. I know Alabama is hot. And Alabama has a lot of humidity in the summer. I've been there in the summer.
Pretty rough.
And
Pretty rough sometimes.
You step out of your truck and you instantly start sweating.
Mhm.
Well, that was the way it was here in West Virginia. We were with a group in Ohio, and my wife was facing our camper. We have a camper we take and go to some of these meetings, and we were sitting there. It was Friday night. We got everything set up, and the mosquitoes were bad. We're sitting between 2 boggy areas, and it's bad mosquitoes. You moved, and it was like they just come up in a carpet and start attacking.
Yep.
And we were sitting there, and we had a fire going, and it was keeping the mosquitoes away mostly. Every once in a while you're still getting bit. But the smoke from the fire was keeping them away. And she was looking at our camper, and we have an orange light on the outside of our camper. Along with, we have a white light that goes across our canopy on the front of the camper. Well, I had turned that off and left the orange light on. And she looked down at our camper, and at the time she had vertigo, where if she bent over and tried to stand back up, she'd get real dizzy. And she was sitting there in a chair, and she was looking down at the camper, and I noticed her rubbing her eyes, and I looked over her kind of like, what are you doing? And she didn't say anything, and she was staring at our camper. Finally, she elbowed me in the ribs underneath my left arm. I thought I was hit with a baseball bat when she elbowed me. And she's only 5 foot tall. Evidently, she'd been trying to get me to look in the direction she was looking to make sure that she was seeing what she was seeing. Now, what she was seeing was 3 young ones, and they were stair-stepped in size. And they were just rolling around, pushing each other around and everything else down there. And everybody else mainly everybody had their backs to them. It was just her sitting here looking down, and I was on her right side, and I had my chair, and I was turned around talking to another person, another investigator that was there. And we were talking, and she elbowed me, and I turned around. I said, "What?" She said, "Do you not see those 3 Bigfoot down there at the camper?" And I looked down, and everybody else turned and looked, and they weren't there. And I said, "What do you mean 3 Bigfoot? Honey, you would see the 3 Bigfoot." She said, "No, they were little ones." And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, okay, she's had too much. She's done been bit by mosquitoes, and the heat's getting to her, and her vertigo, and she's seeing things. And I said, "Do you want to go to the camper?" She said, "No, I don't want to go down there." So I didn't look. And at this point, I'm sitting there, and she quits looking down there. She turns her chair so she can't look that way. And I'm sitting there, and I look up, and I'm talking to other people there, and I'm asking her, "You want me to get down and get you something to drink?" And we had drinks in the truck. I drove our pickup up there, and I walked over to the truck, come back over and sit down. When I sit down, I kind of looked up and was looking at another investigator. He had a big tent sitting behind this humongous oak tree. I couldn't get my arms around this thing. It's how big it was. And this thing steps out. Now he's got a light on in his tent and then a lantern on the other side of his tent. So this thing is backlit. Now this thing had press. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, okay. And she's standing there and she made a noise. And until she jerked, like she grunted or something. And she turned and looked at me, or looked in our direction. And when I turned around, I looked at Jack and I said, "Hey, that's your tent?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Is your wife here?" He said, "No." I said, "You didn't bring a girlfriend or something with you that's in a tent?" He said, "No." I said, "Well, you got a visitor at your tent." And he looked at me, he said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I just saw a big female step out from behind that oak tree, and I saw her have boobs and turned around and looked at us and then turned and went behind the oak tree." Well, at that point, he jumps up. Another guy jumped up too with him. They went walking down there. By the time they walked the 60 yards down to his tent, this thing had took off running and went into the trees towards the bogey area. And they got down there and found a partial footprint. And they're like, "Yeah, there's a footprint down here. Where did it go?" And I said, "It went to the tree line all across there." Because there was no other camp, so there's no other light. But I could hear her hit the gravel road, and then I heard her hit the leaves. And everybody's like, "They're right in our campground." I said, "Yeah, so what? They're not here to harm you. They're trying to figure out what we are." I said, "The wife saw the three little ones, and the three little ones wouldn't be here if they thought we were going to harm them." And everybody, about an hour or two later, everybody kind of, got up from the fireplace and went back to their camp. And about, I'd say it was about 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, I got up to go to the bathroom and I got growled at. When I opened the bathroom door.
Got back in the tent?
No, I was in a camper.
Oh, yeah.
A solid-sided camper. I don't sleep in tents. I've got back problems, from working in construction mainly all my life and driving a truck. And that, causes your back to give you problems after you get to my age, over 50. And and whenever I got growled at, I guess it woke her up. She said, What's wrong? I said, "Nothing. I just got growled at." She said, "From where?" I said, "Just out behind the camp. Just right here outside the camper." And I guess I had startled it or whatever. It was walking through the campground or getting ready to cross the main road and go over to the other side of the bog. And at that point, we had a pretty good day on Saturday. And then Saturday evening, I love my wife. She's giving me a look right now you just would not believe. Saturday night, everybody was sitting there around the campfire again after they had their meeting at 7 o'clock. This is probably 9 o'clock at night. And it's pitch black. Everybody's got lights, around their campsite or whatever. And she looks at me and she says, it's time. And I said, "Time for what?" She said, "It's time for you to do a Bigfoot call." Now, as soon as she said that, everybody else went, "Oh, I want to hear this." And I'm like, "No, you don't. No, I don't want to do this." And I grabbed a bottle of water and I took a drink and I got up and walked a few feet away. And I did what my wife calls the constipated hillbilly.
I can imagine.
Yeah, it's loud and it's aggressive. And I walked back over and I sat down. I said, "Now you happy?" She kind of smiled at me, you don't, it's that smile you get from your wife, like, good boy, you did what I told you to do. So I sat there and drank the rest of the water and we kept talking. And then we were sitting there and then we heard a loud stomp. And it couldn't have been more than about 70 or 80 yards in the wood line. And she looked at me and the two other investigators that were sitting there. It's another couple, and they looked at me and they said, "What in the world was that?" I said, "That's an alpha stomping his foot because of that scream. It's his way of saying he's not happy." And he done it again, and everybody heard it, and they all turned and were looking and trying to figure out where he was at. And I got up and I did a kind of a growl with a loud growl, but short and forceful, telling him, "Hey, you don't want to come up here. If you do, you're dealing with me." And at that point, we heard him go around us, cross the road, and then we heard a whoop from up the road from a female, and he answered her. And then everybody kind of, well, I'm tired. I'm going to bed.
Right then? Sorry.
Huh?
You heard him answer her from like right where she was standing, where he was standing.
Yeah, he was just across the road from us, almost even with the group that was sitting in the middle of the campground.
So he's fairly close, and he whooped right then. Whoop.
Yeah, she whooped probably 200 or 300 yards up the road, and we heard it. It was one of those loud, long whoops that the females do. Like, "Hey, I'm up here, need you to come," is basically what she was saying, I believe. And he answered her with a little scream. And everybody kind of got up and said, "Well, I'm going to go to bed. I've had enough." And everybody kind of disappeared from the fire, and everybody went to their campers. And
how in the world do you go to bed after that? That's what I'm thinking.
Well, I don't think many of them slept very well. That's
yeah, I was going to say, that'd be rough.
Because we got up, I went over and I went down with my wife, and she was talking to me the whole time, walking her to the camper. "What does that mean? What's he going to do?" And I'm like, "No, don't worry about it. He's just answering the female. He's saying, 'Yes, dear,' whatever." And we went to bed, and it took her a little bit to go to sleep. When she finally went to sleep, we got up probably 7:00 in the morning, and we started packing up, getting ready to leave. And one of them got up and said, "Man, we just went to bed at 4. We just went to sleep around 4 or 5 o'clock." So most of them didn't go to bed they went to bed, but they didn't go to sleep. 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and this was at 11 o'clock. So they stayed up for an extra 4 or 5 hours.
That's just adrenaline city, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't know how I'd handle it. I've been in a situation where I thought I was about to have to handle it before, and it turned out to be a false alarm, and so I kind of got a dose of it. But I think I handled it pretty well. At one point, I just accepted my fate, and I was going to put myself and be a willing participant. I knew they wouldn't kill you usually, for the statistically.
Well, statistically, the thing of it is, everybody hears about these. Everybody wants to hear the nice encounters, where they'll scream at you, or they'll see them, or from a distance or whatever. But most of your interactions with Bigfoot tend to be aggressive. And people look at me like when I say that, and they're like, "No, you're wrong. No, I'm right. Bigfoot doesn't want anything to do with humans. They don't like you being in the woods. They will tolerate you at certain times of the year because you're carrying a firearm, because they know what a firearm is. They know it hurts. They've seen other ones of their clan or or, get shot and, rip hide and hair and muscle away. And they've seen all that, and they understand that when a person's got a firearm, to leave them alone.
Boomstick.
And, you hear a lot of encounters of, hunters being in tree stands, stuff like that. But you don't hear the back end of the story when the hunter goes to leave. They get chauffeured out. They'll get rocks thrown at them. They'll get a limb thrown at them, or they get a tree pushed over. And the Bigfoot is, now you're in their domain. You're there at dark. And they let you know in no uncertain terms, we don't want you here. Get out of here. Don't come back. And, I've dealt with Bigfoot that have attempted to kill people. And that's not a good situation.
No. David Pilates finally had to admit that kind of happened a little bit.
Yeah.
It might be part of his missing 411 tapes.
Yeah.
Encounters, not tapes.
Well, I used to listen to him a lot, and he's good at telling a story about someone that disappeared. Well, the problem with it is, I understand other people kill other people. I get that. Just coming across somebody in the woods, you can probably get by with it. If you can hide their body and they don't find their body long enough, by that time, most of the evidence is gone. You ain't going to get caught. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of times when somebody is, they find the guy's boots at his camper, and then 10 miles later, they find his hat.
Mm-hmm. Found his gun like a mile away from where he was.
Yeah. Stuff like that, that's not a person doing that. That person was there at his camp. He's trout fishing, whatever he's doing, or he's hunting. And all of a sudden you start finding clothing miles apart. That's not normal for a human being to do. They're not just going to up and walk away from their camp without their boots. And when that happens, mostly it's probably one of the cryptids that's grabbed them and taken them and killed them, broke their neck, done something to them to kill them, and are taking them away to feed on them. And people don't want to hear that, but that happens a lot more than people know.
Some of those encounters people just found, and how did they get there? Like in a tree. One lady was in a tree. Like, what's she doing? I know he did a special. It was like 50 hours long about Bigfoot. I tried to watch it and I couldn't do it because I kept falling asleep. But it was basically like what you're saying there.
Well, I just got an account from up in the upper peninsula of Michigan of 3 people dying. A group of 6 Bigfoot, what I call the Gugway.
The bad ones.
Dead. And the U.S. government was the one that went in and killed the whole plant. So, that's something that I get all the time. I hear from truckers where Bigfoot come up and smack the side of their truck, wake them up, scare the living daylights out of them. Move an 80,000-pound tractor trailer, one Bigfoot moving it. Stuff like that. They're not being nice. They're not nice. They're upset about something. They're either upset about you being there, or the noise your vehicle's making, or you've done something that they feel is an affront to them. And when that happens, you get physical. They get physical. It's like dealing with a 2-year-old and taking their toy away.
Yep.
It's exactly what you have to look like.
Cryptic Crystal is asking, are Gugway different from a Bigfoot? Yeah, they got a snout like a baboon.
Yeah. And they have incisor teeth that stick out, either from the bottom or the top. And they're a meat eater. They're opportunistic meat eaters. They will hunt humans.
Crystal, check out the Google the movie Primal Rage. Crystal, and that's
And that's a
Gugway in the
Gugway.
movie. It looks like a baboon and
Yeah.
a Bigfoot. Crazy looking. We'll try to land the plane here, Bear. But in your opinion and hypothesis, what do you think the Bigfoot actually are? Like, is it a great ape? Is it a person? A people type kind of thing?
Well,
And where do they hide? Where do they hide? Is part two.
Well, to answer your first part, in a way, they are a type of people because of the DNA that's been done on them. They have human DNA, female human DNA, and then the male part has not been decided upon, or they don't want to release what male side is. So, in a sense of term of people, human, yes, they're type of humanoid, not a human, a humanoid, and they can think on the same level we do. So that puts them in our level, in our playing field.
It's not just like a silverback on the hind legs
No,
all the time.
no.
I think that's what some people think.
They're not an animal. They're not an animal in the sense of a gorilla, a chimpanzee, an orang. They are a humanoid that thinks, can solve problems. They know how to survive in the wild. They know how to kill other animals out there, and they know how to kill us. They catch us off guard, and that happens. And your second part of your question was again,
like where do they hide during the, like, we don't see them, but they're there. But where do they like, how come they're not like known as an animal to the greater population? Like, how do they stay so hidden?
well, it's not that they stay hidden. It's that you have, and I've had visits with federal government people from the ABC people, tell me to shut up, tell me not to talk about them. The federal government knows about these things because they have to go in and kill some sometimes because they harm humans. And the scientists, if you think about a scientist, where do they make their most money?
Universities.
Okay, who pays universities?
The government, for the most
Federal
part.
taxpayer.
A lot of grants.
Right. It's all public money.
And the state.
And if they lose that public money, what happens? They're no longer doing any kind of thing at all. Federal government come in and say, "Yeah, you lost your grant. $1.5 million is no longer yours. Pay it all back." So that's the problem, that science does not do a lot of investigation on these creatures. They've been killed, taken in and examined, taken apart, found out how they, where their heart, lungs, everything is inside of them. Science has done that, but it's never been publicized. It's not going to be, because if it ever is, the almighty dollar gets taken away from the federal government because people are going to start suing them.
It'd be a lot of enlightenment. I think it's crazy that the Skinwalker Ranch thing, privately funded, actually finding stuff and telling us about it.
Yeah. Now, if it was up to the federal government, you wouldn't hear a thing about that.
Yeah, they would just squash it and probably bulldoze it down. Probably put a tactical nuke in there. You never know. One more thing. Has Cryptic Crystals asking if you'd ever seen a Gugway? Gug.
I have seen a Gugway. Unluckily, I've seen 5 of them. I've had to get out of the woods because of them. And I also have seen the type called Janoskwa, the ones that look like demons walking the earth. They kill their own.
That kind of thing.
And humans.
What was I going to ask? There was crap. I was going to ask something. Yeah, I think we probably already talked about the funding, like with the the guy that funds Skinwalker Ranch is private. Like, I was just thinking, like, you think if somebody would put just a little bit of funding into trying to find a cryptid like that, maybe into even like funding like a commune way back in the woods to habituate with them and not, exploit them, but maybe just to be friends as far as the friends can go.
That's
And that
been
can be
tried.
like, yeah.
It has been tried. The problem with it was after about 6 months, the Bigfoot became aggressive because somebody did something stupid. They just wasn't thinking, and it caused a problem, and the Bigfoot didn't like it.
Yeah, that's somebody. I was gonna have a co-host on here tonight, and he's a biologist, master's in biology. And
Mm-hmm.
he is the best. He's good intentions. He's smart as a whip, and me and him will brainstorm to death about how to get one to trust us, to give us a body of one that died natural.
You can feed a Bigfoot, and they'll trust you to an extent, but sooner than later, you will do something. You will either not feed them when you're supposed to, or you'll get sick and can't feed them, and can't get nobody else to go out there and your family to do it. And when that happens, they throw a temper tantrum and they will let you know about it. A lady in Indiana here a few years ago, she was telling me she was feeding this certain Bigfoot. She got sick, and her mother lived with her. And when she was in the hospital, her mother couldn't go out there. She's just too old to be doing things like that. And when she came home, she still couldn't feed him for a couple of weeks. And when she finally made it out there with a bushel of apples and little toys that she got, this thing put her back in the house. And it started smacking the house and doing other things, growling at them, looking in the windows and growling at her, and trying to intimidate the living daylights out of her and her mother. And it was actually pushing on the door one night. And she contacted me because I gave her my number. And she contacted me and said, "What am I going to do?" I said, "Well, you got two choices. You either shoot it and kill it, shoot it in the head and kill it, or you force it away." I said, "Have somebody come out and put lights all the way around your house, 12, 13, 14 feet up in the air to where they can't, where this 8-foot tall creature can't reach it,
Mm-hmm.
or you are going to have to shoot it." And she took my advice. And when she'd go outside the back of her house where this thing was hanging out in the woods, sitting up there watching her, she carried a shotgun with slugs in it. And she had to fire a couple of shots at it. And after that, it took the ant and it left. So they don't, you can befriend them for a short point of time, but sooner or later, they get upset.
Yeah, it's kind of what it sounds like. It sounds like feeding bear almost.
Yeah.
And eventually it just goes awry. Remember the grizzly man? He said in his journal, his last entry was a new bear has entered the camp. And all they found was his bone. And all they found was his bones.
We found his girlfriend. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was an idiot. You don't trust a wild animal for any amount of time.
Can you imagine being that? Like, I don't know. I like being in the woods and stuff, but I don't trust animals.
You better not even trust a white-tailed deer.
Yeah, they'll kick you to death, cut you.
Yeah.
Anytime I see somebody online, they get caught in barbed wire and stuff, and they'll go and try to eat them. I'm like, man, that thing is going to slash you to ribbons.
Yep.
That's why you poke.
And that's usually what happens.
Mm-hmm. Well, man, you've been a great guest. This has been fun. I needed this live interaction other than recording. And where can they find you? I know you got the YouTube channel. It is in the description as we speak, and that's where they can find you. But do you have it's an Old Bear's Den, and it's literally right there in the description of this YouTube channel and on the podcast. If you're listening via audio in the future, it's in the podcast description as well. But do you have a website or anything other than the YouTube or a social
Well,
media?
I have a Facebook page, and it's called Old
Okay.
Bears Den. You can reach me through Facebook. You can reach me through my YouTube channel, Old Bears Den of
Mhm.
Bigfoot. And if you got trouble and you want somebody to at least try to talk you into giving you some help, some advice, you can reach out through my email, which is oldbearsden2019@gmail.com.
Cool.
And if you need to
Yeah,
talk to me, just ask me for a phone number. I'll give you my phone number.
and the stories on the YouTube channel are good too. I like the guys sitting around the fire.
Oh yeah, that's
I have
most
them.
fun we have.
Yeah, I have them like I got 2 monitors at work, and I can make it real small. And
Mhm.
since it's not really anything like happening in the video, it's just audio. I have them playing, so it's like I'm
Right.
in a fire. I got a fireplace off to the side. I'm listening to that one guy talking. He goes, "Yeah, I'm from Alabama." The first one
Mm-hmm.
talking about how they're coming out of the mountains and everything. Like, God,
Mhm.
kind of want that to happen, but I kind of don't. But
Well, it's glorified, but it's um, people that see a Bigfoot, it hits them in one of two ways. They want to start looking for them, find out what these creatures are, what they do,
Mhm.
how they do everything, and then it becomes a lifelong obsession. And if that doesn't happen, the other reaction is they're scared to death. They're
Yep.
afraid of the dark. They don't go out in the woods. They don't go out to lakes. They don't go out hiking. They don't do anything. They end up wanting to stay in their house all the time, become a shut-in, and they're scared to death for the rest of their life.
Yep. I was going to say,
And
or they never go outside ever again. That's the
Right.
option too. I've had them both on here. Yeah, I don't know. I think I would. Maybe it wouldn't get me as hard, but I don't know.
well, if you ever
Anyways,
see
folks.
one, and
Yeah.
if you ever see one, you need to talk to somebody. You're more than welcome to give me a shout. I'll sit
I
down and
will.
talk with you however long.
Yeah, and maybe I'll gather some more information in the coming months and have you back on. I'm always learning things I didn't know, basically. So
Mm-hmm.
I find stuff out and I'll call the guest back. I'm like, dude, we got to talk about this again because I didn't even know that was the thing.
Well, yeah, just reach out to me anytime, day or night. Like I said before, I'm a truck driver. I'm out on the road a lot. And the next time I get to Alabama, I'll give you a shout beforehand and let you know what day I'll be down. And, we'll try to get together. And
I would say we can meet at Buc-ee's, but you can't have a truck there.
I don't care what Bucket says.
The Buc-ee's thing. I love it. Anyway, thanks everybody for watching. Thanks, Old Bear, for coming on. I needed some stories about Bigfoot tonight. It's my favorite thing to talk about. And everybody, please hit that subscribe button and share. And be sure to check out my website, bobbydizzle.com, for the iTunes and Spotify links. Peace out, everybody. Thanks, Old Bear. You've been great.
Thank you.
I never didn't believe in Bigfoot. I never believed in it. I didn't believe in it. I never gave it any thought.
They kept wood knocking back and forth to each other, and it was in a pattern.
Barn owls don't typically throw rocks.
I come across these tracks.
Sasquatch is still not on my mind.